The I bond, the inflation treasury bond interest rate has dropped significantly yet again. Are these still a great investment? What if you already have some money in them? I've got all that and more coming up. My name's Mike Bernard. I'm the host of The Wise Money Show. I'm also one of the certified financial planners right here at Korhorn Financial Group. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and smash that thumbs up button. The I bond we've talked about quite a bit as it's grown in popularity given the inflationary features that it has and this high inflationary time period. Well, they change their interest rate every 6 months. We just got the new interest rate just recently. As expected, it dropped significantly. This is something that I've warned you about if you were going to invest some dollars into the savings bond. Does this spell trouble? Does this create a lot of challenges if you already have these I bonds? Let's get into that. So to start, how do they work again? Okay, so it's a savings bond, it's a treasury bond, right? Like maybe you had when you were a kid or something like that. You might think, well, it's a savings bond. Yes, you would get them as a kid. These have to be really, really simple types of financial instruments. No, they are wildly complicated. Some of the most complicated financial instruments out there. And the inflation bond, the I bond, is certainly no exception to that. Essentially, these are 30-year bonds. Okay, so once you invest in them, you can hold them for 30 years. After 30 years, they mature, stop paying interest. When you do invest in them, you have to hold it for 12 months. You cannot sell or get your dollars out within 12 months. You can get your dollars out after that 12-month period, but if it's anywhere in the first 5 years, then you actually give up 3 months of interest. So there's a little bit of interest penalty to get your money out within the first few years. How does the interest rate work? Well, the interest rate is actually two components. There's a fixed rate, which is generally very low, but that is part of the update. That's a little bit of the good news. Generally very low. It had been 0.4% in the previous 6 months. It was 0% before that. That's the fixed rate. And that fixed rate stays that rate for the life of the loan. But then there's a variable rate. The variable rate changes every 6 months, okay? It changes every 6 months, and that variable rate, that's right, is based on current inflation. And therefore, if you invest and it changes every 6 months. It changes on May 1st and changes on November 1st. So if you purchase or you put dollars into an I bond, let's say in October, yeah, you get that interest rate. Well, the interest rate changes in November, but you get that interest rate for 6 months. And then it will change to whatever the next rate is 6 months after that, and you'll have that for 6 months. So it's sort of this rolling time period depending on when you invested in the I bonds. But that inflation component, that variable rate, that will change. It will change for you regardless of when you invested, and so it will change every 6 months. Could it go negative? Yes, but will that make your overall yield negative? No, but it could make it zero. Okay, so you've got to be aware of that. And then the other interesting thing about, I'll give you a couple more. One is back when these interest rates were really, really high, when inflation was soaring and not cooling off the way it appears to be now, people wanted to put all their money into these things. And I don't blame you, except that there's a limit on 10 grand. 10 grand per year. There's a way to get around that. I've done some videos on that. We're not going to talk about it here. But there's a way to buy some actual through your tax return and so on, some physical bonds through your tax return. But for the most part, it's 10 grand per person per year, and you buy those through treasurydirect.com. So you're actually buying them electronically, and that adds a little bit of complexity as well. But there you have it. So that's essentially how the I bonds work. The interest rate, how has it gone? Before we talk about the change that just started on May 1st. So previously, the fixed rate was 0.4%, so at least you got a little bit of something. The full rate for a year, 6.88%. Now, that's if you look on the Treasury website, it actually shows you the rate for 6 months, so you double that, and that's what your annual rate is. So that was the 6 month for any I bonds from November 1st, 2022 up until April 30th of 23. Prior to that, the rate was 9.62%. That's tremendous. That's significant. Prior to that, it was 7.12%. Prior to that, 3.5%. And then coming out of COVID, when inflation, we all knew it was going to heat up, and it was starting to, but there really wasn't much evidence of it yet, down 1.6% in that range. So I've shared at the time that these interest rates were going up. While it's fantastic, you can't really ignore these. You may want to put some dollars there, but just be aware. You're not going to have this high of an interest rate for a long time. That interest rate's going to be coming down. In fact, the economy will have to get inflation and interest rates under control. There will be a time when this bond earns zero. And if you've held it long enough and you're willing to, then cash it in at that point or whatever, then maybe that's a good play for you. But we are officially starting to see inflation cool and these I-bond interest rates cool as well. Right now, that new interest rate for these next 6 months, for any bonds invested May 1st of 2023 to October 31st, or if you've already held them, what's your new 6-month rate? 4.3% is what that interest rate is going to be. Now, the good news is your fixed rate, which you're going to have for the life of the loan, 0.9%. That's actually pretty stinking good. And if inflation gets way down and under control and interest rates drop, that actually might be that's a really good rate that you're going to be locking in. And so the inflation component has obviously dropped as well. So 4.3 is the overall interest rate with these I-bonds. Is that so attractive that you should be putting more dollars in there? I would be careful of that. And the reason why is these are complicated. There's limitations on how much you can get, how much you can put in, limitations on when you can get dollars out and how much you can get dollars out. They're a little bit complicated, and being able to see them and have access to them, and when you pass away, how does this work? So there's enough complexity that you might say a 4.3% interest rate that probably is going to be going lower from here, not higher. I hope not. May not be worth that complexity, especially when you look at other interest rates. Well, if you look at other interest rates, you go to your local bank, they're still paying 1% or nothing. Well, I did a video about the First Republic Bank collapsing and talk through, the reasons why. And yeah, I don't think you're going to get great interest rates at your local bank, but an online money market that's FDIC insured, fully liquid, and at no cost, they're paying 4%. I've seen some at 4.25. Capital One Bank, which is the one I use, not paying as much. They've always sort of lagged and what they're paying, 3.75%. But even though that's not quite 4.3, having the money in a bank account in a money market is fully liquid. You can access it at any time. You've got beneficiaries attached to it. It's just easy versus these I-bonds or savings bonds where it's not. So to me, a 4.3 interest rate with I-bonds, not so enticing to be worth the extra effort and complexity of using I-bonds. So I probably wouldn't be looking to add a lot more dollars into these. Now, does this mean, okay, this is the evidence, I invested in these couple, maybe a year ago, a couple interest rates ago, I need to start pulling these dollars out? I wouldn't get there yet, but I would expect it, guys. In fact, I'm hoping we don't see a double top inflation. I would expect that in 6 months from now, that interest rate to come down again and be below what you can get in your normal savings account, money market account, something like that. So be aware of that. Yeah, so there you have it. The I-bond interest rate dropped again. That is actually good news because it suggests and means that inflation overall is cooling off, probably such that you don't put new dollars in, but not so bad that you need to pull dollars out. Work with your certified financial planner. Number one, make sure that you've got a full picture of your financial life. These I-bonds, treasurydirect.com, that's a little bit outside your normal view of your financial life. Make sure it's incorporated there so these dollars don't get lost per se, or there's tons and tons of savings bonds out there that people still hold that are paying 0% interest. Why? Because they're just off someone's radar screen and they're not keeping track of them. So make sure you're keeping track of them. Work with your CFP on your overall banking strategy and cash reserve emergency fund strategy as well. If you don't have a CFP on your team, you can contact one on my team. Find us online, Korhorn.com. That's Korhorn with K, wisemoneyshow.com. You can find us there as well, or send us an email, info@korhorn.com. All right, there you have it. Go out and take your next wise step in your financial life.